But then on the other hand, to Amos, it was a job well done. Amos came on this planet with a specific assignment, and he carried it out to the hilt. Who was Amos Wilson? Amos Wilson, first and foremost, was a warrior, a courageous warrior, a dedicated warrior, a focused warrior, a visionary warrior, a disciplined warrior. What struck me about Amos falls into 5 categories. First, in being around Amos, you recognize one thing: race first. Race first. It wasn't about his family. It wasn't about his friends. It was about African people. And he never put his son, his family, or his friends above his race. And the sacrifices that Amos made, first and foremost, was to his people, a true hallmark of a courageous, dedicated, focused, visionary, and disciplined warrior. Secondly, Amos was a servant. Amos served black people. And I'm not saying this as an exaggeration. This is not a speech or a statement that is made just to fit the occasion. This is the real, true life of Amos Wilson. Some people it's hard to stand up and talk about because they really have never done nothing. And you really find yourselves having to tell a lie about their life. But that wasn't the case with Amos. Amos served in a sense that whatever needs he thought black folks had, he went out and sought answers. He's not a person who complained, not a person who raised questions, not a person who was engaged in antagonisms, wasn't fighting internal wars among black folks, but he was seeking answers. When we raise questions about our children and their development, Amos went out and wrote The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child as an answer to our problem. And then he went further and wrote Enhancing the Intelligence of the African Child as a solution to our problem. And then when we began to question our minds and whether they were really black or not, and if they were not, how could they become black, Amos wrote Eurocentric Practical Dogmatism, its relationship to the mental health diagnosis of African people. And then went further and wrote The Falsification of African Consciousness. And then Amos saw genocide being practiced in our own community by each other. He gave us an answer to that. Black on black violence, the psychodynamics of black self-annihilation in service of white domination. And then finally, as we began to talk about empowerment, political, economic, cultural, social, and we looked to our leaders or our misleaders and found out that they did not have an agenda for us. as to how we were to achieve true black power, Amos sat down in his last work to address the powerlessness of black people and wrote Blueprint for Black Power. Nobody paid Amos to do this. Amos did not have to serve our community. Could have been a professor at Harvard or Yale or Stanford or the University of Michigan, making a healthy salary, toning down what he had to say so that it would be amenable to white people. But instead of that, Amos lived a Spartan life. No luxuries. Many times wearing shoes with holes in them and had to be filled up with cardboard boxes. And the reason why Amos did that, because of his undying love for us. I talked to Dr. Clark earlier this week, who had to go out to Chicago to help someone else who was in dire need, a trip that he had already scheduled, and we all know that had he not made that commitment, where he would be tonight. And as I talked to Dr. Clark, and he said, you know, Amos really made real sacrifices for his people, opened up a store and didn't really get the support that he deserved, and then went on and still opened up African World Info Systems as a think tank for African people, and lectured wherever he could in order to raise money for it. In some places, Amos lectured and people would beat him out of his money, would promise to give him an honorarium at the end of the evening, would get amnesia. And Amos would not quarrel, would not raise a stink, would simply say, brother, I understand, and would walk away. And continue to do work for black people. And so as I listened to Dr. Clark, it came to me that many of us gave up on Amos, but Amos never gave up on us, all the way to the end, and gave his life in service to African people. And I don't know anybody else that I know who has led such an admirable life as Amos N. Wilson. And if there's anybody who deserves sainthood, anybody who deserves sainthood among us, it is Amos Wilson. And Amos wrote Blueprint for Black Power because he recognized that to a people who do not know where they are headed, any road will get them there. Amos recognized that we did not have an agenda. Our leadership did not have one. And so he wrote this book as our guide, our map, our agenda. And so we want to make sure that that book is published and distributed as Amos would have wanted it to be. But in addition to all of that, let me finally say this. Yes, Amos Wilson was a scholar. Yes, Amos Wilson was a warrior. Yes, Amos Wilson was a servant. Yes, Amos Wilson was a navigator. But that wasn't Amos' greatest quality. Amos' greatest quality is one that we too often take for granted. One that we too many times ignore, and I know I'm guilty of this myself. Amos' greatest quality was his good moral character. That was his greatest quality. And you cannot build a liberation movement. You cannot become a true warrior if your character is bad. The foundation for what Amos was laid in his character. And that was his greatest quality. Amos was not about deadbeating nobody. And as Amos leaves this earth, the one thing that Amos can say that so many of us cannot say, I never did anything to harm my people. Very few people can say that. Certainly very few people who have the educational background of an Amos Wilson. Too many of our leaders today, if they had to come forward, they could not compare with Amos Wilson. And I have fought with a lot of great warriors, but the one thing that I overlooked, and it didn't come to me until after I was suspended from the practice of law, is that there can be no true warrior who has bad character. There may be a lot of people who may do a lot of good things, but if their character is bad, they're ultimately going to do in the race. They may do a lot of great things, but anybody who rests on bad character is someone who is ultimately going to do in the race. And I learned that personally. I've been around a lot of great people, but if your character is bad, we can't make it. And so this is why Amos Wilson is a true model. And I hope just one other book is written about Amos, and that is the biography of Amos Wilson. And I hope that book is read to every child, every African child on the continent and throughout the diaspora. His life and the qualities of his life, because in that sense, Amos Wilson ranked up there with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, because he exercised moral authority. And so, before we get into our program tonight, I said that it was nothing more important, because we owe this to Amos. Every penny, every nickel, every dime that we collect tonight will be handed over to the African World Info Systems and the Wilson family to carry out the legacy of Amos Wilson. And at the end of the night, before you leave, we will make an announcement of exactly how much was raised. And every dollar, every quarter, every dime, every nickel, every penny will be given to that family, because Amos did not leave the wealth of Bill Cosby or the wealth of Oprah Winfrey. Amos made a supreme sacrifice for us, even to the extent that he has a son in college whose future educationally is not secure. And we have to undertake that responsibility ourselves. See, some of us got to have a feeling and some sympathy for somebody who has done so much for us. I'm not going to allow, as long as I have a breath, I'm not going to allow that boy to miss a day in school. I'm not going to do that. If we had to come to the Slave Theater every Wednesday night and raise money, or wherever we had to raise it, we had to go on the corner with a tin cup and beg the black community. That's going to be done, because we owe that to Amos Wilson. No warrior should have to leave the face of this earth, and his people do not see fit to protect his offsprings. We would be an unfit people if this boy could not continue his education, because Amos put us before his own son. Because if he had not put us before his own son, we wouldn't have to be up here trying to raise this money tonight. If he had been teaching at Columbia University, they would have had a $100,000 or $500,000 life insurance policy on his life. If he had been at Columbia University. But he put us before his own son. Put us before his own family. Put us before his friends. There's not that many people out here that would do that. It's not that many people who would do that. A lot of people are speaking in the name of black people, but they're not speaking on behalf of black people. It's a big difference in using the name of black folks and speaking for black folks. It's a big difference. Amos wasn't one of those Negroes who had one speech for white folks and another one for black folks. His speech was the same throughout, and it was documented in his books. And many of our people would never know Amos because he was not attractive to the news media, because he was speaking truth to power. And they don't put that on television. They don't televise that. They don't put people who speak truth to power in the newspapers. If you are in the newspapers all the time, you're not speaking truth to power. If you're in the newspaper all the time. Because they don't do that. They don't elevate those of us who really have real significance to the black community. They don't do that. They understood Amos Wilson's significance to us. If we had lost anybody, it could not have been a greater loss than the loss of Amos Wilson. If we had lost anybody. And yet, had it been some of these Negroes that should have passed, who should have had a stroke, who white folks should have put a plug on, y'all would have been out here crying crocodile tears. But I'm extremely saddened because I understood this brother, and every week I would call Amos and would say, Amos, is there anything that we can do for you? And you know, Amos did not want to take things. He really didn't. He didn't want to be a privileged person. He didn't want to be a privileged person at all. And somehow or another, Amos heard the word that I said, that with certain few exceptions, we tried to have a diverse group of speakers here. And so therefore, most people probably wouldn't come back other than maybe once every 6 months, if that. And do you know that if I would call Amos and ask him to come within 6 months, Amos would find some reason why he couldn't come to the slave? But if I waited 6 months and then called him, he would say, okay, brother, I'll be there. Because he did not want to be any more privileged than anybody else. And he enforced that on himself. And I told Amos many times, I said, Amos, you know, there would be a lot that I wish I could do for you. And I really did. And sometimes Amos is really one of the few people who really made me question whether I did the right thing. And I don't mean in terms of selling out black people, because I'm not about that. But the right thing in the sense of the right tactics. And I asked myself, would I have been better for the race if I had just gone out and been an excellent lawyer, like a Johnny Cochran, made millions of dollars, and then financed people like Amos Wilson? Make sure that people like that, because money don't mean nothing. Money don't mean nothing. It has no real worth at all. It really doesn't. It doesn't mean a thing. So I'm not infatuated with money under any circumstance. But when I looked at people like Amos, I really cried because of my own powerlessness. Because I really, many times, would have loved to be able to say, Amos, here's $50,000. Go out and do that research the way it should be done. Don't run to this library and that library. Have your own computer system right here, brother, so that you don't have to live like that. You know, and it really pained me, and I say this because some kind of way, what I'm interested in doing, and I'm going to find some way of making the money to do it, is to set up a foundation so that when the next Amos Wilson comes by, that his life won't be premature. He won't have to die of a stroke and stress because he had to do so much that was beyond human ability in order to do. We really do not need to have people like Amos come in the world and make the supreme sacrifice at an early age. We really don't need that, and we really need to correct that. And these are our real heroes. And I'm so glad that in my lifetime that I was able to walk with a real saint. With a real saint. If we didn't live another day, our life has been complete by the fact that we were with Saint Amos N. Wilson. And so tonight, as I said before, those who write checks, please do not write them to the United African Movement tonight. Anybody that write a check, please make it payable to the African World Info Systems. African World Info System, AFRIKAN, World, WRLD, Info, INFO Systems, SYSTEMS. African World Info Systems. And I can tell you that I know that they need this money, and nobody is more deserving of it than Amos Wilson. And this won't be the first time that we will do this. It won't be the first time. We've done it before. We've been very generous to a lot of people. This movement is not about making money for ourselves. That's not what this movement is about. This movement is about helping each other. That's the only way we're going to get out of this. A mutual aid society. We got to go back to the old days. When we came out of slavery, we developed a mutual aid society to make sure that everybody was protected. We didn't know anything about welfare. When I grew up in Georgia, we were sharecroppers. But we didn't know anything about welfare. We didn't know anything about homelessness, because if you needed a home, you could share our home. We didn't know anything about hunger, because if you didn't have a meal, you could sit at our table. We didn't know anything about being without clothes, because grandmother would put together some clothes, sew some clothes, in order to make sure that we were not deprived. So we have never been an impoverished people. You have to allow yourself to become impoverished. And poverty is a mental state. You have to submit to the will of somebody else to become impoverished. Because you don't have to become impoverished. You can overcome that. And you overcome it by us holding each other's hands, expressing love and concern for each other, because no force on the face of the earth can defeat us if we are together. There's no force on the face of the earth that can defeat us if we are together. And so tonight we're going to raise this real quick, and then after that we will be hearing from our elders and our scholars and our activists. And so very quickly, those of you who can give, please give something. And then at the end of this evening, we will be reporting the proceeds of what we will be given to Amos Wilson. So all of you now, please come on down and let's get this out of the way very fast. The Ruby Ware, who sells the City Sun outside, she is in Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, or what is now called Interfaith Hospital, I believe, has suffered a stroke. I'll get that information for you, Hamp. Has suffered a stroke, and from what I've been told, is not doing that well. And certainly, those of you who can go by Interfaith Hospital and just smile, I'm sure it will bring some sunshine into her life so that she can overcome this illness. And then we're very pleased that Minister Clemson Brown is out of the hospital and at home. Many of you know he was stricken by malaria. And so I've talked to him today, and he sounds better than he has sounded in some time. So I know your prayers and your support and your spirits have brought him a mighty long way. Then there's so many others of us who are suffering illnesses, the tensions of living in a racist, white supremacist society is really taking us out. And so we got to love each other more than we ever have. But we got to love ourselves first before we can help anyone amongst us. And so for the rest of this evening, we will be listening to the kind and generous words of those who are on stage, and some of you who may be off stage and want to come up and can come up to give tribute to a great warrior who deserves our gold medal for a job well done. And so, in commissioning this tribute, it is only appropriate that we start off with our elder, Dr. Yosef Ben Yachanan.
Due to the amount of us, I will try to make my delivery rather brief. But the physical body of Brother Amos is here with us. His spirit soul, which the ancient people of the Nile Valley call his ka, along with his heart soul, which they equally call his ba, has now moved on to another plane. So we must tomorrow go and stay with the cat, K-H-E-T, the body. Not for Brother Amos, because what we have not done for him before, we cannot do now. If you had intended to do something for Brother Amos, you are too late. It's all over. So we are here now to search ourselves.
That's right.
Not Brother Amos. I've been on that road a few years ago, the stroke road. Last year, around July, my daughter died the exact age of Brother Amos, 53, a child. But what Brother Amos did in 53 years, take all the years of most of us and add it together, and we haven't done one half. The Brother Maddox said it is one thing particularly that make him love Brother Amos so much: integrity.
All right.
It's not, a lot of us could do a lot of things because we got a lot of money.
All right.
But it's how and for what reason we did it.
All right. There you go.
And how it would look to those who follow us, who are to inherit what we have done. You know, how do you come by a stroke? You don't have to be a physician to understand it. We come to a stroke by overloading our sensory nerves. And most of us overload it because of a lot of different things. Getting cold because, as he said, wearing shoes without sole. Getting cold because you are in a business with no heat. You don't eat proper. You trying to do too much, trying to maintain a living for yourself and those loved ones of yours, and trying to solve the problem of the world overnight.
All right. All right.
But the point is, you got to do it. The problem with Brother Amos is that Brother Amos could do nothing else. Oh yes, I have said it 101 times. I'm not going to live this way anymore. I got Dr. Lewis and Mrs. Lewis to write up a program for me so that I don't overstress myself. It's a beautiful document. It's a beautiful document, but it don't mean a damn thing. Because I'm going to do what I'm not supposed to do anyhow. And that's Brother Amos. Somehow, we tell ourselves we're not going to do it, we're going to conserve ourselves. But so many fakers we have to come back with. Take Jesse Jackson, for example. How are you going to hook up? If Brother Amos had hooked up with Jesse, he'd have been dead already. There's some things you got to understand that don't care how you plan it. It was the character, integrity. If you have integrity, certain things are going to happen to you when you collide with certain forces. And we have to stop lying to each other. Brother Amos died because we killed him. Let me repeat that one. Brother Amos died prematurely because we killed him. We give, including me, a certain amount of money tonight. Amos needed that money before last Friday when he got sick. And we didn't give it to him. We didn't ask him, Brother Amos, you don't look so good. Or I heard you writing so and so. You need money to finish this job. Can I help you? Sure, you were going to say, no, I'm all right. It's an honest lie. The integrity doesn't allow the brother to say, yeah, brother, I need help. So he tell you an honest lie because he has something to do for you and me. Don't let it happen to Jeffries.
All right.
Don't let it happen to Chassis. Don't let it happen to Brother Scobie. Don't let it happen to Brother Small. Huh? And then you would know that being here tonight was really something we meant. So, unfortunately, I have to do like Brother Amos, jump on a plane Friday morning and can't be here with the family for the service. It hurts. But I'm certainly going to be there tomorrow with the cat and with the family, trying to say to them, because I can't say anything to him, I'm going to try to say, I don't know if Brother Amos' mother and father are alive. I don't even know that. But if any aunt or anybody who is his senior, I'm going to try to console them. I frankly am going to try to sing a song for them, to say a poem for them. I'm going to exhilarate with them a song of joy in their sorrow. Because his mother's pain 53 years ago became my joy 53 years later. So tomorrow, when you go and hold a hand, his son's hand, and others who have lost so much, we must talk to them and because it's in their loss, the fact that he was here is our joy. And let us not tell them a stupid, sorrow word of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Let us tell them a word of joy. Let us not call on Allah, Jehovah, or Jesus to be sorry, please forgive his soul. For what? The man lived a great life. He doesn't need anybody to forgive his soul. Whatever errors he made it in his fight for his people. And error is the ways of man. Whatever error I make, that's your problem. It's an error. It was not willful. So please, whatever you thought that Brother Amos did wrong, he did not do it with contempt. He did it by error. So all I got to say to you, Brother Amos, and your way, wherever you're going, please chalk a direction, put the arrow so that I could walk in the right direction. Since you're going to be there before I get there, make way for me too.
All right. Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. We really need to reflect on the wise words of our elder, Dr. Ben. He certainly said something that I personally witnessed myself. Before I was suspended from the practice of law in May of 1990, I had been told that if I continued to carry on in the struggle the way that I was carrying on, my life was limited. Had I not been suspended from the practice of law in May of 1990, I am absolutely assured that I would have been dead by December. There's no question about it. It had gotten just that tight. And Dr. Ben said something that's real, and we need to think about it. It was, and I want everybody to listen to this very carefully, and don't come to no judgment until I finish. It was black folks that was killing me, and it was white folks that saved me. The irony of it is that black folks didn't intend to kill me, and white folks didn't intend to save me. That's the real irony. And when you get out there, you can't really turn around. You don't know at no point where you can slow down. You just out there. And the difference between me and Amos is that there was an intervening force in my life. And Amos just went to the end of the cliff and went over. Nobody put a stumbling block to slow him down. Nobody took him out of operation. He just went out. And that is very real. Our condition as a people is of crisis proportions. And, you know, I just really just cry so many times at how hard it is for us as a people. And I can understand really what Amos was doing as well as anybody in the world. Amos couldn't turn around. He was on a mission. When he heard our cries, heard our debate, he just cranked it up a little bit more to try to bring it all home. And it's really the kind of life that we really live. And as Dr. Ben said, because he wasn't a TV personality, because he wasn't a news media personality, people really did not know what he was doing and did not care. And yet, he was working as hard as anybody here for our liberation. There's nobody here in America that was working any harder and working more diligently and more sincerely than Amos Wilson. I know all the players. I know all the players. And Amos had a quality that we're going to miss. And I know that I am going to miss. It's just refreshing to see somebody just plain and honest and who just really love their people and who's willing to put race first. And certainly someone in that dimension, someone that we honored just recently, and she came out tonight, even though I know that she is not feeling as well as she should be, and we need to tell her to slow down a little bit. We need to let her know that we will put a little bit more in so that she can take a little bit more out, and so that we can have her around here a little bit longer, because we're going to put in our fair share, and that's Dr. Shasi McIntyre. Let's give her a big hand.
Hotep. Abai Ghani, Assalamu alaikum, shalom, and peace to all. I'm not going anywhere. The ancestors said we sending you back again. Thanks to my Messiah. Leonard introduced me to this lovely sister from New Jersey, Carol Messiah, when I was in the hospital in March. And she came and took care of me every day, checked what they were doing. So when I was back in this time, she came and she brought me here tonight, because they put me in this tube called the MRI. Is that what it is? And it takes a three-dimensional picture of your brain. And they didn't find nothing. I ain't revealing nothing to these white folks. And they can look in there until they die. And I know the thing that Amos knew, and I've come to tell you that you cannot depend upon tomorrow. You better get up off your behinds and do what you got to do today. That's what Amos wanted you to know. You can't wait till every Wednesday and Alton call. We have got to get up and do it every day, every minute. See, we're living in a fool's world. They are killing our children, and we are helping them. And what Amos's writings tell you is they're not doing that because you're black. And they're not doing that because they think you're stupid. They are doing that on page 182, Black on Black Violence, because white folks do that. They did it before they ever came here. They exported it here. All their thieves, all their crimes, all their syphilis and diseases. It is not an accident that I keep getting sick living in this white land. It is not an accident that 60% of the flu cases emanate from New York. It is not an accident that on my campus, 8 or 9 of the people with cancer are black when only about 15 of the faculty are. We are being killed by the venom in this society. And we are being killed because people like Amos Wilson are telling us what to do, and we're reading it and saying, oh, isn't he a nice writer? The man is not a writer. He is an African spirit sent to you people to show you the way. He didn't write what he wrote for you to read it. He wrote what he wrote for you to get up off your behinds and do something. And we gotta do it, folks. I'm sorry. We are in serious trouble. Now, I'm going to leave New York, hopefully by September. I'm going back to work for 2 months and get all my money to retire. And then I'm going down south, because I am not going to die in the north. My father came from Nova Scotia and migrated to Boston thinking he had arrived in the south. I told my husband I wanted to go south, and this is as far as we got. Since I was 8 years old, as the African Holy Ghost can testify, I have been asking people, please take me somewhere there are no white people. 1940, woman from Corpus Christi promised to take me, and my mother reneged. But if we have to be up here, if we have to fight in this atmosphere that is killing us, the air up here is, we should all go back to Georgia with Alton. We need to get out of New York. But if we cannot get out of New York, we need to bring the South up here. We need to bring our culture here. If you listen to the theme running through the video, you will hear James Small's theme, Len Jeffries' theme, Dr. Ben's theme, John Clark's theme, Rosalind Jeffries, Marimba Ani. Culture. If your mind doesn't understand your culture, environment determines culture. Culture determines consciousness. I argue you cannot maintain an African culture here easily. Easily. And I know why I get stretched out. I know why James gets stretched out. I know why Leonard gets stretched out. Trying to live black in a white devil's world. Can't do it. So my message to you is that we have got to save each other, and not after we get sick, but before. Hotel.
Let's give Dr. McIntyre a big hand. Dr. Sharsty McIntyre. Is Carol Messiah in the audience, or she's over in the concessionary area? I just wanted to acknowledge her because we need more Carol Messiahs. Dr. Ben should not have to walk out of his door unless a car is waiting. Y'all hear me? Y'all, we should just call Dr. Ben up and everybody assign themselves one day. Dr. Clark, the same thing. A lot of times, even when they're doing their research, they need someone just to run downtown or somewhere to check out something. That takes a lot of stress off of them. We need to organize ourselves so that when they do pass, we'll know that they lived a natural life and that we kept all stress away from them. And that's very, very, very important. I remember Dr. Ben today said, I want to come over. He said, and I said, well, he said, I'll get over there. I said, well, Dr. Ben, Dr. Lewis is not in town. He said, well, I'll find a way to get over. I said, no, brother, we will provide transportation. We don't want you on no subways. We don't want you in no cab. You're going to be in a car that we will be furnishing ourselves. Same thing I told our next speaker, Professor Scobie. I said, Professor Scobie, don't be above allowing us to do something for you, because our life is better because they preceded us. Our life is better because they preceded us. And so at this time, let's give a warm, rousing ovation for Professor Edward Scobie.
Hotep, my sisters and brothers. Hotep. Sometimes you get a little worried about words, serious words, meaningful words, words that carry with them action, action dedicated to us, our people. Because we all know words without action, without sincerity, without dedication, doesn't mean anything.
All right.
I know that Amos knew that, and that he epitomized all that was worthy in us as African people. When I think of him. We have been on platforms together. The last time was on the 28th of December at the 125th Street Theater, the Victoria 5, with Brother George Simmons. And I had my hand on a seat next to me because I kept looking for him all the time to come in. That night, he didn't come in because he wasn't feeling too well. And naturally, one worries when a brother's not feeling too well, and particularly someone like Amos. And you know, George, we all kept looking and wondering. He didn't come. But what stays with me, and I'm sure stays with us, is something that no amount of money, no amount of education in the phony, hypocritical walls of Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, you name them, could give us. He gave us something that was money couldn't buy. Harvard couldn't give it to you, couldn't give it to me. And sometimes I get a bit worried when I hear some people saying, after all, so-and-so didn't go to Harvard, didn't go to MIT. I think, what a great joy that that person didn't go there. What a great joy that I didn't go there. If you listened at the weekend to one of the supposedly politically radical stations discussing the 25 years of black studies, you would feel to do two things at the same time, spit and vomit. I have never heard a bunch, a motley group of performing seals talking so much pseudo-intellectual rubbish as they did over the weekend. All the quotations, all the scholars were quoting, was it Heskovich, which that's his name? And others of the same ilk. They were quoting Hegel, they were quoting Marx, they were quoting everybody, accepting themselves and their African ancestors and scholars. I got the impression after listening that these men obviously are raceless. And they are stuck in a pernicious rootlessness and pathlessness that they will never recover from. And when they go, I am sure the ancestors will turn their backs on them. Because for a group of supposedly educated, miseducated is a better word, to stand or to stay before a microphone and castigate others, castigate themselves, and put the God of whiteness before everything they said, is murder. Murder to themselves. And I am sure that those who brought them into the world must have been thoroughly ashamed of them. The wishy-washiness of one of them, the baloney of the other. I thought to myself, you know, thank our African gods for people, scholars, fighters, activists, warriors like Amos, like Dr. Ben, like Dr. Clark, like Shasi, like Dr. Jeffries, like Dr. James Small, and others. Thanks for that. And I say this, that one of the most terrible things that has happened to us, wherever we may be, whether it is here or in England or in the Caribbean or on the mainland of Africa itself, the meeting with Europeans has been a colossal disaster. The irony of it all is that millions of us do not realize that. And that is why when I hear people saying that we are poor, we may be poor in monetary things. But Amos wasn't poor of the mind. He was a multi-millionaire with his mind, his African mind. That is the mind. This is the legacy we must give and leave to our children born and those not born yet. This is the legacy. When you have an African mind, white supremacy can't do anything to you. Anything. It even ceases to make you afraid. Prisons won't frighten you. But you see, white supremacy, many of us do not realize that the problem really is precisely those two words I just mentioned, white supremacy. It's been with us from time immemorial. And I can say this, Amos said it many times. In his book, Black on Black Violence, which I want to quote one short passage before I leave the microphone, he knew very well that it was not going to leave off of us. It was going to remain, because that is how they are going to take dominion and hold on to the evils of the world. I can only hope there is not one of us who seriously believes that they are going to give ground and allow us to share any kind of power with them.
All right. All right.
When you become older in years, but not necessarily of the mind, you realize one thing. After you have lived and you have gained the knocks that we all get in life, the best education that we have got, the knocks that we have got in life, they teach us the best lessons in the world. You do not become wise, and you do not become conscious of yourself in a classroom in one of those white universities. You don't. These classrooms are made to diminish you. They teach you as you're a faceless, classless person, raceless person. Amos believed that race mattered, as Alton has been saying a while ago. I can remember when a function was given, we were honoring Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben. I'm sure many of you must remember that Amos was going to give, or had to give, the feature address. Do you remember? But so many things happened that night. We did so many things that that feature address had to be given almost at the end. And do you remember Amos standing there with all the humility in himself, but all the consciousness, the truth, and the power in what he was saying? Said, I will make it short. It was short, it was powerful, it was dedicated, it was honest, and it was Amos. And I will not forget that. One of the things you can't forget. Amos has gone to the ancestors. But we have a tendency to think that, you know, funerals, memorials are for those that have gone. That's only half of the truth. Do you know, that's only half of the reality. These occasions are for the living as well. There is a lesson that the departed who has gone to the ancestors is saying, is reminding you, is telling you, this occasion is for you too. And you have to think for yourself. You have to gain consciousness while you're at this ceremony. Because you too will have to go and meet the ancestors. So the lesson is a two-way one. When we think of Brother Amos, we must always bear that in mind. What else? You cannot say anything else except, I remember that Amos came from the blood of the ancestors, the blood of those that went before. We too should come from that blood. The blood of the warrior, the blood of the maroon. Because in every one of us, there is a maroon in every one of us. A maroon that is saying no to white supremacy. A maroon is saying, I'm going to fight you. I'm going to fight you. And a voice that is saying, a maroon in us is saying, we must not fight ourselves. We must more think of the words of one of the great maroons, one of the great ones in Brazil, Luis Gama, who said that when an African kills an enslaved African, kills his master, he performs an act of self-defense. Metaphorically, economically, and by our very movements, we must commit acts of self-defense against white supremacy. I must quote those few words when I remember Amos. He says in this very short, very, very short piece that I'm going to quote, white supremacy, by its very nature and intent, requires the continuing oppression and subordination of African peoples, and in time may require their very lives. Subordination of a people requires that that people in some way or ways be violated, dehumanized, humiliated, and that some type of violence be perpetrated against them. The memory of Brother Amos demands, asks, hopes that we remember those words and destroy white supremacy. Thank you, my sisters and brothers.
Professor Scobie, let's give Professor Scobie a big hand. We have three more speakers: Colin Moore, Professor James Smalls, and Dr. Leonard Jeffries. But before they come on, let me give you this. Tomorrow is the wake from 5 to 8 at African World Info Systems, which is located at 256 East 138th Street in the Bronx. That's African World Info Systems, 256 East 138th Street in the Bronx. Take the 5 train to 138th Street. The 5 train to 138th, the 6 train to 3rd Avenue, and the 4 train to 138th Street. 5 train, 138th Street, 6 train, 3rd Avenue, 4 train, 138th. And for further information, tomorrow you may call 718-993-1122. That's for tomorrow. That's the wake. On Friday is the funeral. That's 11:30, I believe. At Benter's Funeral Home, 141st Street and St. Nicholas Avenue. That's on Friday morning, 11:30 a.m. That's Benton Funeral Home, 141st Street and St. Nicholas Avenue. And certainly we are hoping that everybody will be able to come to the wake tomorrow and then to the funeral on Friday. And I believe he will be interned at Valhalla, New York. He will be interned at Valhalla, New York. And it, brother said 5. He said 5. And so at this particular time, someone who has certainly been on the front lines and to whom white folks have tried to break him away from us through character assassination, and yet he's still around. And although he has been suspended from the practice of law, that's not enough. They now want him disbarred. Let's give a warm ovation to Colin Moore, attorney at war, Colin Moore.
Hotep, brothers and sisters. When I heard Alton mention the place where Brother Amos is going to be interred, which is Valhalla, New York, there is a touch of irony in this, because Valhalla, New York is near where there is a correctional facility. And one of the focus of our brother Amos Wilson has always been about the incarceration of our African young people. So even as he is laid to rest, he will be laid to rest not far from one of the institutions that incarcerates our people. And I think this is perhaps appropriate. It is perhaps appropriate because this is a brother who was not merely interested in formulating theories, who was not merely interested in putting forward hypotheses or dissertations. This was a scholar warrior who lived to fight the battles for the black community. This is a man who used his pen as a mighty sword on behalf of his people. And he follows in the tradition of a whole list of scholar warriors. For example, Dr. Walter Rodney, our Dr. Ben Yakanan, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Jeffrey, Dr. Scobie, Sister Sharshi McIntyre, Dr. Small. He comes out of a great and glorious African tradition in which we have combined scholarship with a call to battle. So we need to pay tribute to that characteristic. And the other day I was reading Brother Wilson's book on black and black violence. And if there is one tribute I think we can pay to the brother, it is for almost each of us to purchase a copy of his book. Very often we pay tribute to people after they're gone. And we go to funerals and things like that and wakes. And we make martyrs of our people after they are gone. It is better, I think, to pay tribute to them when they are alive. And to perpetuate their memory by becoming a living testament. In this book, Black and Black Violence, Amos Wilson put forward a different theory. Most scholars, when they speak of the causes of violence, they attribute it to dysfunctional families, poverty, lack of education, and so forth. Amos Wilson put forward the theory that racism was one of the determinants of black-on-black violence. And brothers and sisters, and that is a theory that has got to be developed, Dr. Jeffrey, because this society has never acknowledged. Every time there's racism, it's, it's due to the dysfunctional black family. To Moynihan and all these apologists who blame the victim for the problems of the victim. The fact of the matter is that we have seriously got to develop the theory and the fact that white racism is the primary determining cause of black-on-black violence in our community. And not only people think of racism as a theory or a philosophy or an ideology of white supremacy. Racism is also a disease, as Sister Carol Taylor will tell you. And the life of Amos Wilson shows us that racism is a fatal disease. It kills also. Because why is it that African Americans who come from the same social economic class as white people, they did studies of this, who may eat the same diet and have the same lifestyle, are 5 times more likely to suffer and die from hypertension than white people? Why is that? Obviously, because racism has a lot to do, my brothers and sisters, with the contraction of this disease and our mortality rates. And so therefore, in a sense, this brother was killed, not by hypertension, but by the racist conditions which made it so very difficult for him to function in this society. And you know, as I had a conversation with Dr. Ben before, and we were thinking of, in a sense, how tough it is for a scholar warrior or an activist attorney to survive in this society. Because once the white man has deprived us of the means of living, once he has taken away that license or whatever, then he realizes it becomes very difficult for us to function. And so, brothers and sisters, we have got to provide somewhere along the line the resources so that when brothers and sisters go face to face against the system and we are deprived of our means of livelihood, that we do not have to go begging hands and knees back to the master. That as we come to our people will provide us with the means of sustenance. Because the fact of the matter is that these people lift up and exalt their intellectuals. They provide foundations, the heritage foundations, the Ford foundations, the Carnegie, the trilateral commissions. I remember when Governor Rockefeller took Kissinger out of Harvard University, made this man and his wife a millionaire, you know, and ensured that Kissinger would never again have to toil for his livelihood. And this is the way they do it. It is very difficult for any intellectual to have to do research and then have to find the necessary resources to pay his rent, to sell his books, and to make a living. That is stress, my brothers. That is stress. And that's now how it's supposed to be. And we have got to ensure that far and above and beyond the rhetoric, that we put into place the mechanisms to prolong the active and functioning lives of our people. And so if there is one tribute we can pay to a life which should not have ended so soon, it is that we will have to develop some means of setting up non-profit foundations, as our brother said, or some type of think tanks or whatever you want to call it, so that when they decide to take the sword and the javelin and go against a Ben Yakanan, a Leonard Jeffrey, a Scobie, a Small, or a Sharshi McIntyre, that they will not exult in their triumph. Because even as these people are run out of universities, there will be the university of the people that will welcome them with open arms. So tonight, my brothers and sisters, my simple farewell to this brother is a little West Indian saying. It is, walk good, Brother Amos. Thank you.
Attorney Colin Moore. Let's give Colin. I wonder if Amos had gone to theology school and got a big church. I wonder would he still be alive today. I really wonder. You know, we talk about providing. We can provide. We provide every day. We provide every day. You got more storefront churches on Fulton Street than you got slave theaters. And they all raising more money. And so it really shows you where our priorities are, and even those who are down the street shouting tonight should be here. But it's the conditions they suffer of white domination and the white Jesus that has really made our priorities screwed up. And this is what Amos Wilson was trying to correct and gave his life in order to do it. I've been told now that the viewing and the wake has been extended, and it will start at 3 p.m. instead of 5 p.m. And it will last until 8 p.m. And the body will be brought to African World Info Systems. And so the viewing of the body will start at 3 o'clock, although the body may not get that till about 5. Is that the body be there at 3? The body will be there at 3 o'clock. The viewing of the body will start at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon and will continue until 8 p.m. at African World Info Systems, 256 East 138th Street in the Bronx. Further information, call 718-993-1122. So we are in the stretch now, coming home. And certainly there are no two brothers who can bring it all home than the next two speakers. One of them who have been a loyal lieutenant, a great colonel, to a real general. And that's Dr., and I call him doctor, even though he has some problems with it. I think he's a doctor. He doesn't like to be called a doctor, but I think he's a doctor. And, you know, it's something about our culture. I was reading this, I don't know whether it's true or not. I haven't consulted with Dr. Ben. I read in a European paper, the LA Times, but they were talking about in ancient Egypt how our ancestors would give each other titles. And I know we had to get it from somewhere, because every preacher is a doctor. It ain't no more reverends. They're all doctors. Every preacher is a doctor. So if all the preachers can be a doctor, I know James Smalls can be a doctor too. Let's give it up for Dr. James Smalls.
Hotep, I come in peace. I remember the first time I met Amos when he had just finished the developmental psychology of the black child in the law office of Joseph Mack on 149th Street in the early 80s. And got stuck and hooked on this good example from that time on. And the last two times we were together was important. The last time was struggling around the vendors the day that Sharpton and the other got arrested, and it was raining, and we took the responsibility to work with the brothers because we didn't want any of the brothers to go to jail, so we were kind of like police in the protests, and then out there in this rain in the protest, and he was sick that day. And he was coughing, and he finally left the precinct early, but he didn't leave until after everything had been decided in terms of the resolution of that problem. Before that, by a few months, we were in Dallas, Texas, and Amos spoke before me, and I remember then, because that's what I feel like now, how humbling that was, because I couldn't understand why they had me there if they had Amos there. You ever tried to go on a stage behind Amos Wilson and try to explain anything from any perspective? Because Amos was so complete. He was just so complete. And I remember that night sitting there, having heard him so many times sitting in the audience, but sitting there trying to figure out what I could possibly say, and finally concluding there was absolutely nothing that I could say. When he got finished, that I realized just how great an example this man really was. And one of the things that Amos did and will forever do was to remind us not to forget our freedom stories. He wanted us to understand and remember that you must remember your freedom stories. Dr. Ben told us that, you know, religion and our concept of God is the deification of our culture. Okay. And Amos showed us what happens when you accept that your culture should be your deity. So that he lived as what I like to call an imitation of what our ancestors called God. See, he imitated all of that is the best out of our past. And then he used the behavior that was forged from that imitation to strike the blows against our enemies in our behalf. He knew for a long time. I've not known anyone to leave here who didn't know they were going. And I've known a lot of people in nearly 50 years now who knew it was time to go. And I'm sure Amos knew too that it was getting near time to go, because we couldn't possibly be in the image of God and not know when death is approaching your house. You must know. Despite knowing it was approaching, and despite realizing that there was probably adjustments he could make to give himself longevity, he pressed on with the task of imitating the deity and meeting his responsibility to the cause of harmony and freedom for his people. We, as one of the brothers, or my sister mother said, being up here, the greatest tribute we can pay to this man is to take the literature that he has left us and master it and make it a part of our behavior. And as I close, because there's no way to talk about somebody that big in any complete way. You can only make reference to aspects of someone who you want to be like. I remember that night in Texas, wishing so much that I could understand like he understood, and wishing so much that I could tell you so you could understand like he could tell you so you could understand. That he was a good example, the best example, and he always left you realizing it is not how much you know. It is your realization of how much more there was for you to know. So in that, one can not say anything. Amos has earned his place back with the energy from which he came. He used the time in this body on this earth to recreate himself in the image of the deity that caused him to be created in the first place. So he has ascended to what our ancestors describe as heaven, which is a return to that from which he came. If we want to even begin to think of being where he's gone, then we should use him as a good example. Thank you.
Professor James Smalls. You know, it is true that Amos knew that he would be leaving us. As I reflect back, we were seriously discussing the last Wednesday in February as Amos returned to the Slave Theater. And Amos seemed to have great difficulty in making a commitment to be at the slave the last Wednesday in February. As I think about it, Amos was a person who always believed in carrying out his promises. Somehow or another, he could not commit to February because he knew he would be somewhere else. And I remember just the day before he took ill, we were faxing things to him and trying to nail down a date, and it was like Amos knew he had an appointment somewhere else, in another world, carrying out another mission. And so we certainly miss him. And as we are in the last leg of this relay, there's nobody better to bring the baton home than Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Let's give him a big hand.
Hotep, brothers and sisters, I'm certainly glad that I'm here in the country and in New York to be a part of this celebration of this enormous life that we've had a chance to experience. And we've got to figure out how best to make sure that that life is continuously meaningful to us. Dr. Ben is here. He knows all the traditions of the ancestors of Kemet, and one of the important ones is that you have to continually speak the name of that person who's joined the ancestral realm. So we should never stop speaking about our brother, Dr. Amos Wilson. And then if we understand fully our traditions and understand, as Brother Small says, the concept of perfectibility that Dr. Wade Nobles always talks about is built into the Kemet understanding, that you have been created in the image of God, and your mission is to move toward that perfectibility. And so the brother lived that, and that's what Brother Alton was trying to say. He said it's integrity, character, that's at the core of this individual who was with us doing his work and mission. Some of us may have missed a meaningful relationship with him, but he left us an enormous legacy. He left us a school of knowledge. The writings of Brother Amos represent a school of knowledge, just like the writings of Dr. Ben represent a school of knowledge. The writings of Professor Scobie represent a school of knowledge. The writing of Dr. McIntyre, Shashi Charlotte McIntyre, represent a school of knowledge. And that's the legacy that's there for you to tap into. You can ignore it and not empower yourself with the spirit of the brother, or you can envelop that school and make it a part of you. And most of you may not have known that the attack that has been waged on me in attempting to destroy our work and push me out of the university, called the City University of New York. Amos was pushed out of the City University of New York. His field of operation was Hostos College, a branch of the City University of New York. And he was one of the most outstanding, most meaningful professors at Hostos College, and certainly for the African community, and I would venture to say the Latino community as well. He was pushed out of Hostos. And because of the way the City University works, we could not retrieve him. He should have been next to scholar warriors of a similar mind at City College with us. But there's a special relationship between the campuses, and you're part of the same system. But we would have given him tenure forever, forever, and ever. Wouldn't have been no question about that. We gave tenure to a whole lot of people who did not deserve it in the sense that Amos Wilson deserved it. And he would have been there strong alongside of us. Why was he pushed out of Hostos? Because just tap into his school of knowledge, read his books, understand his spirit. This was a warrior I'm in the middle of completing my own statement to the world. Dr. Jeffrey speaks, and the theme is the making of the scholar warrior. So Amos has to carve out, has to have a special place in that. He was a warrior. He was at war. And you have to understand how deep was his war. He was not only at war against the system of white supremacy, as our brother, the attorney at war, Colin Moore, so aptly stated. He was also at war against us. He was at war against that weakness in us that would pull us back into our own self-destruction. He was at war against those of us who are nationalists, true and blue. So we go to Africa every time we get a chance. If someone told me there's a ticket tonight to go to West Africa, I'm on the plane. If someone said, Dr. Ben, here's your ticket to Kemet, he's on the plane. But Amos said, yes, we are African. Yes, I'm a Pan-Africanist. Yes, you are a Pan-Africanist. But let's not spend so much of our time and effort overseas and not take care of Africans right here in these United States, in Brooklyn, in New York. Take care of those in the South, take care of those in the Caribbean, in Latin America. Let's make sure that that Africanness is a true Pan-African world phenomena. He stands as a consciousness to let us not forget that wherever we are, we have to unite and organize our people. So he represents for us the best of the 3 C's. The African value system for Dr. J is characterized by the 3 C's when we look at it in the macro dimension. In relating to our African world, you have to have it a relationship that involves a spiritual connection that involves what I call the 3 C's: communal, cooperative, and collective spiritual development. And that's what he was attempting to do with his work. But he was a humble man. And he would not reach out if the reaching wasn't there. He was not going to ask you to come with him and struggle with him. That was a certain humility he had, a certain integrity he had. You are the makers and shakers of the African world. You should know who Amos Wilson is by his works. He shouldn't have to ask you to be next to him, to be around him, to support him. And that applies to us scholars and applies to all the rest of us. So the brother had an enormous struggle with the larger system of white supremacy, and he approached it in terms of his African approach, tapping into those value systems we call the 3 C's: communal, cooperative, and collective spiritual development. But he was a psychiatrist, psychologist. He was dealing with the mind. And he knew, as Steve Biko stated in his work, the greatest weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And he was at war, struggling for our minds. So there was an internal, a micro-analysis of Brother Amos that we need to appreciate. And in that context, he was dealing with those 3 C's of the internal development, in which he was a concerned, committed, and conscious spirit force among us. So we are blessed to have had him for the 53 years. I'm humbled because tomorrow I will have, if I'm still here, 58 years. And most of you know, a few years ago, it didn't look like I would have another day among y'all with what they had thrown at me, and it's still coming. And it will continue to come because we are at war. And we have to develop the model of this scholar warrior. My commitment is not to an academy of intellectuals called white folks, whether it's Columbia, City College, or the University of the West Indies, or the University of Ghana. My commitment is to use the intellectual skills that I may have mastered in terms of the long-term protracted struggle for our people and our liberation. So we have to see ourselves as scholar warriors. That's the approach that Brother Amos took. That's the approach that Dr. Ben took. Nobody has been invited to more college campuses to teach and obtained a teaching position than Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. But every campus he went to, he saw it as a battleground for the minds and hearts of our people. So he went there and waged war. So there was no question of tenure, it was war. And that's the model that Brother Amos has. We are at war. Dr. Ben goes into a Masonic lodge. He is at war. He goes into a group of fraternities. He's at war, and that's that war I said that Amos was about, trying to retrieve Africans from the insanity of trying to be Afropeans. As quiet as is kept, Brother Amos came out of a sacred African womb. And he learned, in spite of the system of sucking us off into an abyss, that he was going to leave here as an African as he came in. And he decided to make the most of his Africanness while he was here. That's a lesson we need to learn, all of us. As quiet as it's kept, no matter what kind of misconceptions you may have indulged yourself in, you leave in here African. And you may go through the O.J. Simpson syndrome, and the Michael Jackson syndrome, and the Oprah Winfrey syndrome, and Diana Ross syndrome, and Whoopi Goldberg syndrome. But as quiet as it's kept, you going out of here Africans. And you're going to have to meet your makers. And the ancestors will be standing there waiting for you. You're going to have to look Harriet Tubman in the eye as to whether you understood her mission, her purpose, and the example she set. Now, Brother Amos is going to meet Harriet, and they're going to embrace. There'll be no question about it. And you're going to have to meet Brother Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X. And it ain't going to be the Malcolm X of Spike Lee's film. It's going to be Malcolm X that was our black shining prince. And you're going to have to stand there and make your case clear as to what you did when you had your opportunity here.
All right.
And you're going to meet Marcus Garvey. Not Marcus Garvey Jr., who's in Teaneck with me. You're going to meet Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the daddy, who's going to be there and going to put you to the test. It ain't going to be Peter at the pearly gates with the book of deeds. It's going to be the Africans right there trying to determine whether you get into the African heaven or they send you down to a white eternal hell. You got to stand there and be measured. So we can celebrate the brother's life because we know no matter who he meets along that road, he's going to be able to connect in an African way. He's going to meet the Pharaoh Akhenaten, Amenhotep IV, and they're going to embrace. Akhenaten had a mission, and so did this brother. He's going to meet Tutmosis III, Tahutimos III, a warrior pharaoh. And Amos is going to say, I understand your warriorship, because that was mine. You're going to have to understand, brothers and sisters, that your life's work is going to be judged. It's going to be judged by those who went beyond, and it's going to be judged by those who you left behind. And Brother Amos don't have to worry about nothing. It's going to come up a stellar performance at every level. But we have to say, what can we do? And I'm declaring to you before these cameras and before you that the revenue that we hope we will generate, if Dr. McIntyre can maintain her health. What you mean if? If she can maintain her health. She shouldn't be here, but she lifted my spirits when I saw her. She shouldn't stay but so long, and I've got to end what I got to say so that she can get back to keep her health, because she is doing the work for me in helping me put that book together. She'll be doing some of that work. I need her. I need her spirit. I need her analysis. I need her critique. She's at war externally, and she's at war with us. Shashi will beat me down and then lift me up and say, go on and do what you got to do. I need Professor Scobie. He is right now going home working on the book, editing the work that I'm doing. I need in his health. But it's hard for these brothers and sisters to be in a healthy condition because, as what we outlined, they got to pay the rent. Ed Scobie's got 2 daughters in higher education. And one wants to go into the medical profession. One wants to get a doctorate. That means they have to be supported. And of course, Brother Smalls has to keep the chairmanship and the department running. He's not paid a chairmanship's salary or a full professor salary, but he's a full professor. You got to give him a couple of doctorates. You missed the boat, attorney at War Ultimate. Let's give James Smalls a couple of doctorates, super doctorates, for the work that he's doing. We couldn't keep a department open if the brother didn't operate the way he operates. So there's no way we can finish this work of trying to get out the mind of Dr. Jeffries to zap our young people unless this team of people is with me. And we will do it in the name and the spirit of Dr. Amos Wilson. And monies generated. And there will be monies generated because already 30 to 35,000 orders of the book are there and the book is not even ready. Monies generated will go to the fund that Attorney at War Automatics and his warrior queen Leola are putting together to support the son of Amos Wilson in his education and beyond. Now you were here. You heard me make the declaration. There ain't no way I can go back on it. The money ain't going for no big house for Rosalind and Leonard Jeffries somewhere out there somewhere. The money's going to go to do the work of the race in Africa, here, in the Caribbean, wherever we can, whatever resources we generate. Because, and this is the last thing I want to leave you with. When Brother Amos was pushed out of the university, with his skills, he could have sold out. With his skills, he could have sold out. You got people among you selling out today, working at the New York Daily News, the Playtel Benjamins of the world. You got people selling out. And you go and tell them I said so. But Amos wasn't going to do that. He went to you. He went on 125th Street. He said he is going to make his living among his people and make his contribution. We got to study his life at that juncture. What we did not do to make his efforts successful, because all of the ingredients were there for a successful effort among our people. He had the abilities, he had the background, he had the experience, he had the commitment, he had the sense of mission and purpose, he had the sacrifice, he had the discipline, but he could not prosper among us. People selling dope on 125th Street are prospering. People selling their bodies on 125th Street are prospering. People selling liquor on 125th Street are prospering. People selling pocketbooks on 125th Street are prospering. But Amos Wilson could not prosper on 125th Street. As quiet as it's kept. Before Amos, there was somebody else on 125th Street, right across the street from the State Office Building, Dr. Yosef Ben Yakinen. And he did not prosper the way he should have on 125th Street. Because we have not gotten to the point where we know how to support and sacrifice for the best that we have produced. We're not going to produce no more Dr. Benz. There will be another one, not another one coming among us that will have what he has. We have to be blessed and understand we're not going to produce another Dr. Clark, walking around here blind as anyone could be, but going everywhere, doing everything as if no one can stop him. We have to make a commitment in '95 that we put together a serious war chest for these warrior elders and warrior scholars, warrior lawyers, so that they will not have to worry. And we can multiply the resources and the blessings to have a continuous regeneration of resources. Study Dr. Ben's predicament. Study Dr. Clark's predicament. Study Amos Wilson's predicament. Study Alton Maddox's predicament. Study Attorney Moore's predicament. and you'll see that we've got a lot to do. Let's celebrate this beautiful spirit came among us. But let's learn from what his life has meant. Let's make sure these youngsters here will know a Colin Moore by our raising him up. Let's make sure that we will respect Colin Moore's legacy by coming together and putting the resources together. I don't want to come in the slave theater and hear Attorney at War Automatics berating us to generate some resources for this brother, Amos Wilson, and his family and his legacy. It should flow like waters cascading out of the love that Africans have for each other. Then we can do, as Frederick Douglass says, continue to struggle. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Then we can do, as Marcus Garvey says, up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will.
Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Dr. Leonard Jeffries. I know it's moving up, and we just have one more speaker. Brother Patrick, who was on WLIB with me, and Ralph Carter, and who had said when he arrived that he did not want to speak, but the Spirit has moved him to say something for Amos. And I would hope that those of you who are leaving could just stay for another moment, because we do want to make the announcement of how much we raised and what we really need to do, and we're going to be out of here. But at this moment, let's give a warm ovation to Brother Patrick.
While Brother Patrick comes to the mic, the birthday for Dr. J is tomorrow. We'll be celebrating it on Saturday at Clark House in the evening after Professor Scobie makes his presentation at the First World. Brother Patrick, it's all yours.
Respect African people. It's very difficult for me, and that's one of the reasons why I'd asked initially that I didn't want to really say anything. But having spent so much time with Amos, I consider myself a student of Dr. Wilson. And I remember sitting down with Roy Canton, Ralph Carter 2 days ago in Amos's office. And we were just talking about the whole situation, recounting some of the experiences we've had with Amos. And one of the things that came up in the conversation is our parents. And we came to realize that all three of us, and there was another brother in the office also, fathers had died from strokes. And I started thinking how many of us, because it's always an isolated situation, so you never see it as a whole, how many of us are being lost in this way? And it struck me that one of the things that I'd like to say with regards to Amos, because so many times we get close to people and we see them doing things and behaving in certain ways that we know is detrimental to them. But instead of using the love to help them, we kind of use it to stay away. And it's kind of eerie for me, because I sat down with Amos maybe about a year ago, and I had asked him, because he had a problem with a slip disc, and I told him, you know, you need to just kind of take it easy. And we sat down one day and I started asking him, you know that there are certain things that presently you're doing that might be detrimental to you. Why it is that you continue to do it. And he basically said, because I don't know how to do anything else but to do this work. And it, as I said, it's very difficult, because I asked myself, I said, what else could I have done? And I left it like that. I didn't push it any further. But I know that there are many of us in our relationship with each other that know that some of us are living in certain ways that are very stressful to us. And what I'm asking you for, Amos, is to not let that happen. pay a little more attention to each other and what you're doing. Okay? I think that we can't do nothing about that situation now, but we can do about ourselves. We can find out what's happening internally with ourselves, and we can begin to help each other. We shouldn't come here and have to do this that frequently. We shouldn't really have to do this.